7:47, this is Britain's newsroom on GB News. Now, the Home Office announced that mosques will be offered greater protection with new emergency security in light of the ongoing riots.
So how they're going to do that, but we'll find out, I guess, after the Cobra meeting. The police, local authorities and mosques can ask for rapid security to be deployed, to provide extra support and reassurance, as well as allowing people to return to worship as soon as possible.
So let's discuss this issue. We're joined by former chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum, Mohammeed Amin, a friend of the show, and the co-founder of the Together Declaration, Alan Miller. Good morning, gentlemen. This is a sensitive topic, and we have to handle it with the nuance that it requires as we look at the situation across the country. Alan, let me start with you. What's your assessment of what's happened this weekend and the last 4 or 5 days with these riots?
Well, I think it's a very terrible and tragic reality that what we've got is a number of chickens coming home to roost simultaneously. We've got, on the one hand, a very small but very aggressive and, some cases, violent, destructive group who have clearly targeted certain areas. One of them, the migrant hotel, with attacks that we've all seen, and other areas in the community that involves the whole community, which obviously is very, very problematic and should not happen. I think if you step back a little bit and then look at some of the broader issues and what many people in Britain are concerned about, and I will say that I think for the most part, the majority of British people are absolutely decent people. We've shown that through the whole Brexit discussions that people were welcoming. We've got less racism here than comparatively across Europe, and it's very welcoming. So many people, though, are concerned about a number of issues. Obviously, the cost of living crisis, what's gone on during Brexit and not Brexit, then lockdowns, and a feeling that they're not heard and they're often despised and treated with disdain when they raise questions and concerns, whether that's about borders, whether that's about multiculturalism and the question of integration, whether that's about how the police treat some people differently and how the authorities and elected representatives often talk to people as though they're stupid and beyond the pale and use those terms. And then at the same time, there are people on either sides of these situations that are stoking things up, and that is enormously problematic. And I certainly would call for everyone to get involved in proper dialogue openly together with fellow citizens, but dialogue needs to be able to be freely spoken. And so what we saw with Keir's announcement that there will be a clampdown on protests and as we've seen with speech, that is worrying, because people know when they say the far right, often what people mean is people challenging all sorts of questions, whether that's to do with ULEZ or LTNs or borders or integration. And so I would put a call out to everyone to talk to people, particularly we don't agree with, calmly, democratically, openly, but don't allow this narrative as well to be turned into everyone British who's white hates everyone who's British who's not white, because actually we've got many common ties, lots of integration has happened, but in the last few years that's been halted by all sorts of identitarian ideas and difficult questions.
Mohammed, let's bring you into the conversation. I don't know if perhaps you want to respond to what Alan said, but also the Prime Minister, when he spoke yesterday, this is about the far-right mob rule, that is too simplistic a formula to explain what's been going on in the last week.
Actually, the Prime Minister is completely accurate. What we've been seeing over the last week are riots, not protests, riots where people are attacking law-abiding citizens. These riots have been promoted by politicians effectively spreading misinformation, and the Prime Minister is quite right to call it out. Britain has a great story.
Mohammed, hang on. What politicians are provoking it?
Well, the social media post by Nigel Farage last week, where, because he's a very good communicator, he'd avoided saying things that were false, but implied that was asking questions, are things being withheld from us? He knows exactly the impact that words like that will have. We had all kinds of misinformation spreading about the alleged killer in Southport.
Well, that was nothing to do with him. That was nothing to do with him. That was nothing to do with him.
That was actually to do with an American-based company initially leaked that information. That was an American-based company that have nothing to do with this. And we don't know what kind of mischief they intended to create.
When Farage puts out a video saying, are things being withheld from us? What are they not telling us? It's quite clear that he's fanning these conspiracy theories.
Well, what do you think he was insinuating?
What he was insinuating was that the government is withholding things from the British people about this killer.
So, OK, so what you're suggesting then is that, because we have to remember, the spark for this particular fire was the hideous death of three beautiful, innocent young girls. And we're losing that. To some extent, Alan Miller, aren't we, in this debate? That was just the flame, effectively, which began this. But I think there is fault on every side here. We're seeing it being reduced to, as you said, that this is somehow anti-Muslim, and it isn't just that. Some people, yes, but it isn't just that. And if we don't listen to the angry people to some degree, it's only going to get worse, Alan.
I think that it's really important to listen and discuss and have proper dialogue. Clearly, some people have demonstrated that they are violent and they are anti-Muslim. I think it's essential that, I mean, my view, and I've said it many times on GB News, is that in general, migration improves situations in countries. There has been a particular, I mean, America's an amazing example of that, and so are we. That in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a particular strategy that has not been won over with hearts and minds. All of the press, if you look at the backdrop, have addressed that. And now we've got a situation where many...
I'm so sorry.